Hey, welcome everyone to the ArchiCAD User Monthly Webinar for December 2020, the end of a long and very strange and odd year. I hope you are all safe and well. Certainly takes extra effort these days. We are going to have a potpourri of tutorials, and I actually had to look that up just to make sure I was using it properly. You know, potpourri can be like a jar with some fragrant flowers and things like that, but it can also be a collection or a medley of things. And in this case, it's going to be a medley of tutorials that come from various coaching calls, questions. People ask me questions, and I either know the answer and think, yeah, it's a good one to share more widely than that particular context, or I figure out an answer. And in fact, just today, I figured out some new cool tricks that I'm going to be showing you in addition to some of my old familiar ones. Now, let me know that you can hear me and see the screen. You can use the GoToWebinar chat panel. Tell us where you're calling in from as well. So I see Chris Iliff from BC is the first one to do that. And if you are in my ArchiCAD training courses and coaching program, you can use the coaching calls channel in Slack to communicate. All right, I see Paul in Oregon, Rick in Tokyo, Glenn in Boston, Richard in Bermuda, Ian from Scotland, Michael from Maine. All right, so good. We've got already over 60 people in. I imagine we'll have over 100 within the next few minutes, and we shall get started. All right, now I have a long list, just to give you a quick glimpse here. I have a long list of things that could be covered. I'll probably get through, aiming to get through probably this standing seam with curtain walls. That's number 19. So that could be as many as, 15 to 20 different little pieces. Of course, they'll be connected, but let's see what we have. All right, and there'll be a mixture of things that are for, very new users, as well as things that are for more intermediate and even advanced users, some tricks that you may appreciate. So let me get going on this. So the first one that I'm going to show is most easily shown in the context of a project. This is the master template sample project. And for those of you who may not know, Master Template is a commercial product that I created with an architect named Scott Bulmer back in 2007, kept updating every year. It is an office standard in a box, and it does provide a really robust framework for building out ArchiCAD projects. One part of it is a sample project, and this sample project is nothing too fancy, but if we look at it, it's just a little two-story bungalow, California style bungalow there. Now, if we were looking at a section here, of course, we can zoom in on things and check out stuff and look at the elevation. Now, first thing I'm going to show is people sometimes get confused. If I'm on this elevation, which is east, and I say I want to look at the north elevation, okay, so when I double click on that, it is bringing up that north elevation. Now, where's the east one? Well, it's disappeared from the tab bar. Why? Because in the options work environment, I think it may be under on-screen options. I'm not sure. Let's see. Or more options here. One of these, launch new instance here, launch new instance of ArchiCAD. One of these things that says that when you're opening things, and I thought I would be able to quickly find it, where it says, if you're opening another elevation, open it up in the same tab. Now, you can change the preference, which I can find if I looked a little bit further, or you can right-click on something and say, open in new tab. So now I have got this elevation and that elevation. I can flip back and forth between these tabs. Now that's good because you can certainly have as many tabs as you need, and if it gets too long, there's a little drop down that allows you to switch between them. But sometimes you want to be able to look at them side by side. Now, in the standard ArchiCAD environment since, I don't know, whenever it was, it might have been version 20, when they introduced this tab bar and sort of integrated everything as the default within a working view. The sort of older style of having multiple windows on screen that you could move around became less obvious. But here's what we can do. We can go to the window menu and we can go to undock this tab. So right now I'm in the east elevation, I'm undocking it. And you can see now it pops out as a window that I can resize. So I could take this to be whatever size I want. Of course, zoom in and out, or just use the fit in window here. Now I can look at these two side by side. Let me go and undock this one as well. So if I right click on the actual tab, I can also get the same undock tab. And now, of course, I could potentially have two working windows. Now, if I were to make a change, and I'm just going to do something really arbitrary, I'm going to take this roof and drag it up, a little bit here. Okay, and then change the boundary here. The elevation in this case has a boundary set saying it's only going to go up to a certain height. Probably not too important going up, but going down, you may want to, just restrict it so that it's not going super far down or necessarily as thick as your terrain mesh. But you notice I changed it here. We aren't seeing any change there. So in order for it to change, I need to click on it. And then you can see all of a sudden it's flipped up, to this orientation. So it's not quite live, in the sense that if I make a change on something, I won't see it happen instantly in the other window, but I can coordinate back and forth. Let me just undo that stretch here. Actually, the undo will just undo the different things. So here's the drag. And then if I click back in here, this is going to update. All right, so that's just an interesting option that you can use in a lot of different ways. So for example, you could have your 3D window off on another screen. You could have a resource window like something that you have favorites in that you can eyedrop off on another, to the side of your main work. You can also go, and let me just dock these. Let me show you how that works. If I right click on this, there's no option here to dock it, but if I have this window open and I go to the window menu, I can say dock it, and that then puts it back into this group, of the tab bar. And now I can go back to, I think it's a north elevation here, which is floating in space, and again, go to dock that there. Now, one other convenience, sometimes you get a whole lot of tabs going along here, and you just say, closing them one by one, like this may be a nuisance. One thing is you can go back to the floor plan, and I think you can right click and say close all other tabs and windows. And you'll see now that tab bar is clear and you can start fresh. So you may find that useful sometime. Now what else? Oh, so if you do have something, so let's say I go to 3D, bring up, well, here I went to 3D without the right layers because I just used a keyboard shortcut for going to 3D. We can either manually go switch our layer combination to something for, the building and the site here, or of course I can bring up a saved 3D view. Let's see, we have the 3D views up here, and so AXO overall, would be one of the saved ones. Now, if we did want to have this 3D window off to the side, we can go right click on this and say that I'd like to undock the tab. Now, in Windows, you need to, the overall environment is bounded by whatever is the frame of your ArchiCAD. I'm on Mac, so I can literally just drag this over and put it on my other screen, which of course you can't see on the webinar. But on Windows, what you would need to do is do the equivalent of this, where we're resizing or restoring the size of the overall ArchiCAD window, and then you grab this and you take this over to your other screen. Now on the Mac, I can't actually take it to the other screen. I can take these sub-windows over, but for Windows, I believe you can make it span two screens if you want. So I'll just bring this back. So a little bit of window and tab manipulation that you may find useful. Now, another little visual aid in terms of saving time and being able to go places is if I'm on, let's say, the first floor plan here, and let's say that I'm zoomed in on a particular area, like the kitchen. All right. So now I'm zoomed in on this area, and above the kitchen in this particular project is a small bedroom, on the second floor. If I go up to the second floor, we'll see we're in the same actual place as we were before. The second floor, if I go down to the first floor plan here, so the wall, the side wall of the building is here. This is supporting the balcony. We go up and you look carefully, you can see the balcony would be underneath there. Now, if you, there is a setting that people often have set up that gets in the way of this, where you're moving between stories, and let's just go down first floor plan and let's go to the basement plan and we'll see, what we've got. And that is, if we were to say, let's just zoom out to fit in window here. And if I go to the view settings, and I have the view settings where this is not checked, ignore zoom and rotation when opening this view. So this is not checked. I'll get the current Windows settings. So it is the current zoom. So what does that mean? It means we're seeing the whole building here. Now, what'll happen is, first of all, if I zoom in on something and then I double click on this, this is going to take me back to that view. Likewise, if I go to the next story and I'm zoomed in on a particular area, when I go to this other view, it's jumped out. So I've sort of lost track of what I was looking at. So if I go back to this, and let's say that I want to be able to check what's going on in this corner of the building, but on another story, then the view settings for this often benefit from just saying ignore zoom and rotation. You can leave this checked all the time. That's what I usually do, so that when I'm on this floor and I go to another story, it just keeps us in that same view. So that's something that I find very useful. The only general exception would be, and I'll give you an example here, is suppose that we were wanting to work on the kitchen quite a bit. I might zoom in on the kitchen here. I might create a new view, and we'll just call this, kitchen enlarged plan or something like that. And maybe I'm going to even change the layer combination so that it is going to have other layers turned on here. So the kitchen enlarged plan. Now this one, I would want to have an active zoom, so that now if I'm, say, fit in window, and I double click on kitchen enlarged plan, it jumps me to that kitchen plan. Now we could also say that the enlarged plan is going to be at a different scale. Let's say at 3/8 inch to a foot. Now when I do that, you notice how the markers get a little bit smaller here. Let's maybe make it even a little bit more dramatic. Let's make it at 1/2 inch to a foot, or 1 to 24 there. And now you can see how the markers got much smaller, and that means that actually all the text is going to be able to fit in more because we've made this larger. Now when I switch to first floor plan here, you can see this one ignored the zoom, but it did restore the scale, in this case the 1/4 inch, and of course the markers got bigger. So it's important to just understand when that ignore zoom is useful, which I would say for most plan views it is, and when you want it to be unchecked so that it will jump into this particular location of the project. So let me know in your comments if any of these things are new or you go, oh, that could be useful. It always gives me a little feedback on that. And I see other people have joined us. We're now over 100 people here. So I see Kevin from Hong Kong, Joel from Concord across the bay, Bill from Tucson, Paul was just chatting in Italy about ArchiCAD. Okay, but Paul is in Oregon. Doug in Brooklyn. Okay, Buzz in Los Altos. Eric in snowy Boston. And Paul, thanks me for the tip. Kent in San Diego. Nice to see you, Kent. Okay, so we'll continue on. If you've joined us since the beginning and you want to just type in where you're calling in from, it's always fun. Okay, and I'm looking at my Slack thing here. So Rick says very useful little things that I did not know. So Rick is someone who is an American living in Tokyo, and he's on almost every coaching call that I do, as well as the training programs. He's always learning. So that's very cool. I'm sure overall over the years, he continues to just get a little more finesse and speed with all of these tips. All right, so Lewis from Milwaukee, Serene from Fairfax. Oh, you're in my area. I'm in San Rafael, by the way. Paul in Melbourne, good day. All right, so Greg from Brisbane. Okay, we got some Aussies there. And do we have anyone from the UK? Oh, so Ian from Scotland, okay. And Corinne from Burgundy, France. Welcome. Okay, and Lawrence from Wagga Wagga, Australia. I love that name. Okay, another person in snowy New York, Tom Arkunis. Aloha, Nicole from Maui. All right, Nicole, old friend and client. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but we're all getting older. But I've known you for probably 20 years. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. Question came in recently saying, when you have a remodel project, and let me go within this to, let's see, I want where am I? I'm just renovation. Okay, so in the template, I have a whole section for remodel projects, which you don't have to use if it's a new project, but let's go to a demo plan here. Let me just fit in window and we'll see that when I go to the first floor demo plan, it's pretty simple. The original building was designed, stopping here, there was an extension added and there's a partition wall and that's being removed. Okay, so this wall here, of course, does not exist in the planned view. It does exist in the existing first floor. So here's the existing. Now, suppose you wanted to make a note on the demo plan, like here, talking about what should happen in this area, but you didn't want to show it on the existing drawing because it was not relevant. Do you need to have another layer for that? After all, the wall that's existing is shown on both the existing and demo with a different style. What about the annotation? So let's go to the annotation. I'm just going to go to the text tool. We'll go, actually, we'll just leave it on the one that is typically for the floor plan. And I'll just use text. It could be a label here and say, remove this wall carefully. Okay, so little silly note there, right? All right, now that note is shown on the demo plan and it's shown on the first floor plan. Now, when you're showing an existing drawing, as built, you may not want to have that note there. So what I'm going to do is go open up the Renovation Palette. So the Renovation Palette, for those of you who have used it less frequently, you have three categories of elements: existing, that's going to remain; existing, that's going to be demolished; and you have new elements. Right now, we're not showing the new elements. It's in gray because we're looking at the existing plan. Now, when I draw things, they generally will be shown on all relevant layers. So for example, when I go to the new plan, you can see we're showing existing and new, but hiding the demo. Now, this element here is existing just like the other walls, so it's showing on all three of those conditions, existing, demo, and new. I only want it to show on the demo plan. How do you do that? Very simple. I'll go to the demo plan. So this is now, the renovation filter is set for the demolition plan. I did that by double clicking on the view. And what I'll do is I'll click on this little icon here when I have one or more elements selected. It toggles to being pinned on this, let's see if I get the prompt. Oh, I thought that there'd be a little prompt that would tell you what that's doing, but this is pinning it. Now what that means is that it's only going to show this particular element or whatever is selected on this renovation filter. So now if I go to the existing plan, the note disappears even though the wall was on both. And of course, if I go to the new conditions, that has disappeared. It only exists on the one renovation filter that it was pinned to. So this is a very powerful thing, obviously for annotation. You can use that. Now the equivalent in terms of layers, not directly equivalent, but certainly equivalent in terms of usage in master template, and really could be in any tool, any template that you have, is a layer that's only shown on a particular layer combination. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at, in terms of a plan, a reflected ceiling plan here. So we'll go to this. Now, all of the main plans here in reflected ceiling, electrical, MEP, structural, etc. These are all currently set to show the new project. In other words, how it's going to end up. You can see this wall is gone there. Now, we do have some symbols for ceiling lights, as well as some of the electrical elements that are showing, of course, here, and they were not showing a minute ago when I was on the regular floor plan. All right, well, that's pretty easy to understand, and any ArchiCAD user who's gone beyond the very basics understands that. Well, here's the way that we handle it in master template and that you can adapt in your own template. And that is, when we have the reflected ceiling plan, layer combination, it turns on and off certain things, so it's not going to be showing, for example, the site, all of the landscaping, may not show mechanical, it may not show civil for the terrain mesh. Now down in this section here are some layers that have a U prefix, U standing for unique. And you notice, or if you look carefully, you'll see there is one of the U layers that's turned on. It says U drawing ceiling. So anything that's put onto that U drawing ceiling layer only is turned on for reflected ceiling, and anything that's on a different U layer is turned off when this layer combination is in use. Now, if I switch to something like landscape, you can see that the ceiling one went off and the landscape and irrigation U layer went on. So basically, each one of these U layers in the system is turned on only for a particular variation of the plans. So if I do a room finish plan, it's showing the room finish U layer and turning off all the other ones. If I show the site plan, it's going to be showing the U drawing site. So this is a little ad hoc in the sense that it's not, well, it's part of the general layer structure, the layer system, but it is a very powerful way to just say, you know what, when I'm drawing stuff on the ceiling plan, it may be lines, it may be fills, it may be objects, it may be labels, it may be text, could even be 3D elements, but typically all those annotation elements, regardless, or dimensions, regardless of what they are, if they're only going to be shown on the ceiling plan, or only on the site plan, or only on the such and such plan, then put them all onto that unique layer, whatever you call it. I have it in the U grouping, that only shows on that particular drawing. So that's a little trick from Master Template that you can adapt into your own template as well. But it's similar to the idea that we had where the in a simple plan, we have this element pinned to a particular renovation filter. Now, renovation filters and layers are independent systems. So in other words, something can be on the ceiling or floor or roof or anything and be existing, demo, or new. You know, it's sort of independent attribute there. Now we can actually generalize this in another way to create schemes. Now, what do I mean by schemes? Well, you have scheme 1, where the building is this way. You have scheme 2, where something different is being explored. And you may be doing that for your own design study, or you may be showing it to the client saying, well, you know, here are 2 different options for the kitchen or for the facade or for the roof line, things like that. Now, you can have layers to do that, but it can get pretty complicated because after all, you have walls and roofs and furniture and things. And if you wanted to have a wall layer for scheme 1 and furniture for scheme 1 and electrical for scheme 1, you know, then you might need several layers for scheme 1 and several layers for scheme 2. And then your layer combinations get really potentially more complicated. So here is a way that you can deal with this more easily. It has some limitations, but it does handle some cases so elegantly that it's absolutely worth knowing. So I switched over to a new file here. I'm just going to draw a box of walls here, let's say like this, and just have a box. All right. Now, just to make this totally, you know, not no-brainer, but just as simple as possible, let's say that we were thinking of adding on an extension in one area or adding it on in another area. So I will go to the wall tool and just make a little 3-way box here, like this. And I'll make another one, you know, here. All right, so we're saying, well, we could do it here or we could do it there. All right, just to be very simple. Now, in order to take advantage of or to demonstrate this situation, let me bring up the Renovation Palette. And in the Renovation Palette, in the US standard one, they have a whole lot more renovation filters, and they do the one for existing is this, and you can see that actually all the elements that I drew were by default set on new, which is okay as long as you understand that and you say, all right, I want to see the floor plans. Now we're seeing the new stuff. Now, for my purposes, I'm going to go and just make all of these selected elements existing here, and then make these new. So now if I go back to existing, that's interesting. So existing plans, in the Graphisoft standard template, it's showing it with this dotted or dashed line here. I'm going to go to the renovation filter options and say, you know what? In the existing plans, I don't really want to override the existing ones. I want to show them. And, you know, so it's just going to show normally there. Okay, so now I have this existing building. Of course, this one I'm saying is the other alternative. So when I go to from existing to the final floor plans here, I want to be able to toggle back and forth between scheme 1 and scheme 2. So what I'll do now is go to renovation filter options, and we'll take the floor plans, which are the ones that show the eventual output, new elements as well as existing, and I'm going to create a new, I'm going to duplicate it, and we'll say floor plans scheme 1, and we'll create this floor plans scheme 2. Here. All right, so now I have 2 new schemes which are exactly the same. So when I switch between here, and I can do this from this little pop-up at the bottom, or I can do it from the pop-up up here. So all 3 of these are identical. But now what I'm going to do is say that in scheme 1, these guys are pinned, so they only show up on scheme 1. And then I'll switch to scheme 2 and you'll see these disappear. Now I'll go to these and say these are pinned to scheme 2. So now if I go back to floor plans or existing plans, we'll see the original building. And when I do scheme 1, we're seeing one set. And when I'm doing scheme 2, I see the other. Now, I did it with walls. It can have roofs, it can have furniture, it can have annotation, etc. So it's a great way to do this. You could have scheme 3, scheme 4, you could have multiple ones. The main limitation is that it handles one area or one type of variation nicely, but if you want to have 2 and switch back and forth, like the front could have a balcony or it could be without a balcony, and then the back could have a pool or not a pool, or have a big picture window versus something else. Well, if those things are independent and you might pick scheme 1 in the front and scheme B in the back or something like that, you can't use this to say, you can't have something pinned to more than one variation of a scheme. So it's useful for certain things, but has limitations with with getting more complicated. But the main thing is that it doesn't require any more layers. It simply uses the pin option here for the renovation palette. Now, by the way, the pin is visible here. If I select these elements and we go into their settings, you will also see it under classifications and properties here, where it says that this wall is existing. We could call it new, but it's pinned. It's show on renovation filter floor plan scheme 2, and that's what we have set. And then the other thing is we could where is it going to say all relevant filters? It's sort of buried in here. It really should be something outside of this, but this is saying pin to one of those filters, or all relevant filters is the other option. So that's what, when we toggled it, it went from all relevant filters to the specific one that was selected there. Okay, so let's just see if there are any questions and any comments in terms of just understanding and saying, I might try that. So I'm going to look at comments here. All right, so Douglas says pinning trick is new to him. Todd says, why not just make the renovation status for the text to demo? Why pin it? So let's go back to the one that I had here. So let's just say that this is not pinned and it is demo. It is a demo element. Well, a demo element, if I go back to the existing floor plan, demo elements, this is a demo element, it's going to be removed. This is a demo element, it's referring to something that's going to be removed. It's showing on the existing plan. When I go to the demo plan, they both are there. So pinning it by selecting this and pinning it to this, then it does not show on the existing drawing. So that's why what pinning does. All right. So Doug Muir says, shares a shortcut. Command up or down arrow moves between levels without changing the view. So that is a good point, that you can move up and down stories using the keyboard shortcut Command up or Command down or Control up or down. These will do that. Now, in many cases that works just perfectly, but if you're switching to a different layer combination of view that has a different setting, like for example, in this project, when I'm going between first floor plan here and the second floor here, it's actually changing the layer combination. This layer combination is showing certain roof elements on here, whereas the first floor plan does not show the roof elements. It's using a different layer combination. So while your shortcut works fantastically well, and I use it all the time, if you are switching between views. And here's another example, just actually even more relevant. I'm looking at a floor plan. Now I want to look at an electrical plan. I'm still in the same area because it's ignoring the zoom. It is highlighting the electrical elements in a darker pen, and everything else is fading in the background. By the way, if you want to achieve that effect and you aren't sure, how did you do that? Well, it can be done in a few different ways. Very briefly, the settings of this electrical plan, in this case, changes the pen set. So the pen set, which defines the thickness and the colors of the different lines that are drawn, can be set up so that certain elements are just become gray when you want it. So this is one way to do it. I'll just show you that in terms of the pen sets, that when we have our normal view pens, you can see how all of these pens are here. When I go to electrical plan, this whole first row, with one exception, is made gray. So that's one way to say, I'm just looking at similar things, but I'm just coloring them in a different fashion. Now, there's another way to do that with graphic overrides that can be helpful as well, where you select elements of a certain type and make them gray, maybe make everything gray, and then with the graphic override say, if it's on the electrical layer, regardless of whether it's text or an object or something else, then make it a red color or a solid black or something. All right. Any event, so having these without, with ignoring zoom allows you to just move around or change your view, but keep the zoom there. Okay. All right. All right, Diego Blanco says, I needed just that for a two-phase project I'm working on. So yeah, there's a limitation in terms of the renovation filters. You have existing demo and new. You don't have existing demo in phase 1, phase 2. You don't have that sort of extension. I hope Graphisoft at some point adds it. It would be very useful. I don't see why they couldn't. In other words, it's not like a big groundbreaking thing. It just would give more flexibility. And you could, either with the renovation palette or with something else, have more flexibility with schemes so that pinning could be more like a layer combination where something could be pinned on more than one layer, more than one filter. But in any event, so for you, Diego, I guess you would have the normal new filter, or show plan status would show phase 1. So it would be whatever is built in phase 1. And then you'd have another duplicate filter for phase 2, but certain elements would be defined as only showing on the phase 2 filter. Now that would work if it's adding on. It won't work necessarily as well for taking away. So, there'd be some limitations, but you probably could get quite a bit of mileage out of that. All right, so Todd says, I've been making demo notes as a layer. So you can certainly have a layer for the demo notes. It's just one more layer to manage, and this is a way that you don't have to change layer combinations when you change your state. In other words, I'm in the existing plan, the demo plan, and the new plan. They're all the same layer combination, and I don't have to worry about the layers. Not that layers are something to worry about, but it is a way of avoiding having many different layer combinations when you use this. Okay, so Dave says, if a wall is demoed for scheme 1 but not scheme 2, that's a limitation because you can make it show up in scheme 1 or scheme 2, but you can't change whether it's demo or, it just doesn't work that way. So then you would possibly use layers. And you could have a layer for scheme 1 and a layer for scheme 2, and that'll work okay, but you will probably want to put the walls and the roofs and the furniture, etc., all on that layer. Otherwise, you're starting to get several layers for scheme 1, several layers for scheme 2, etc. All right, so Rob says, am I using the Slack channel or something else? So I'm right now using the GoToWebinar chat for most of these comments. That's because this is a public webinar and everybody has access to that. But if you are in Slack, which I know of course you are, Rob, I see you wrote, I was with you, Ken, on 2020. Ken was on 2020. Okay, so there's Slack, for those of you who don't know, is a discussion tool. I use it all the time with members of my ArchiCAD training course, and we have different channels. And the 2020 channel is for comments for the ArchiCAD Best Practices 2020 course, and the coaching channel is for comments from the coaching calls. This is not a coaching call. This is an ArchiCAD user webinar, but it is somewhat similar in that I'm answering your questions and trying to clarify things. Okay, so I do see Ken saying the U-layer distinction is very useful. I use it all the time. And you notice when utilizing a gray pen set for electrical, it works on the electrical plan, but when placing the plan on a layout, the pens no longer stay gray. Okay, so when you place something on a layout here, and we'll go to floor plans. Now, I don't know that I have a plan with the electrical already pre-placed. So let me just go to the floor plans here. This is this, and I'm just going to drag the electrical plan onto this sheet. Now it's going to make a mess, of course. And in fact, it came over with a much bigger frame than necessary. I'll go and say, I'd like this to fit frame to drawing here, and drag this onto the sheet just so we can look at it more easily. All right, now remember we were in the electrical drawing and everything was gray. When I deselect this, it's not gray. All right, the reason is that the default settings for drawings, and actually let me just say, when I put a new drawing on the sheet, where is my drawing tool? There's a default setting. So all tools have defaults, or virtually all tools have defaults. So when you create a new window or a new wall, it uses certain settings. Well, the default for the drawing tool says the pen set should be set to a particular set that's most common, on the layout. This one makes more of the pens black and keeps only some things for differentiation. But you can switch this. Now, this particular one, when I brought it in, instead of using the pen set that was in the view electrical plan, it was overridden by the default. So if I choose this, I select the drawing, tell it, hey, use the setting that I was looking at when I was creating it. Now you can see everything change visually. When I let go here, you can see now it's got the gray. So basically that's your challenge, Ken, or just little thing is you need to either before you put it in or after select it and change the pen set for that drawing. It's also available in the drawing settings where you can say size and appearance here, pen set, either by view or one of the other ones that will override that view. Okay. All right, let me just get rid of this drawing because it's certainly doesn't fit on the page very well. All right, so I see Doug says pen set trick is also new. Lawrence Brill says, can a new layer be added to multiple layer groups in one hit instead of adding one by one? No, sorry. So for those of you who wonder what the heck he means, if I go to a plan here, and so if I were to add a new layer here, so just add a new layer, and we'll say test. Here, this test initially comes in as being hidden on every single layer combination. Graphisoft does that as a sort of, not fail-safe, but just something that if you're bringing stuff in and you accidentally create new layers, we don't want them to just show up willy-nilly on all the drawings and mess them up. If they're not showing, nothing gets messed up, and you can then manually go and say, oh, you know what, this test layer, I want it to be showing on the electrical, I want it to show on the furniture plan, and I want it to show on the partition plan. So when you have this selected here and you click on a series on these icons for the eyeballs and or the lock icons, it will update it. You notice the update button isn't visible because I'm saying this layer I want to tweak here. On the other hand, if I click on any of these layer combinations and then I say, oh, you know what, I want the test to show here, the eyeball, then I have to manually update. So if you want, you can go one by one through your layer combinations and then correct or edit layers and update each time. But if you have just created a new layer, then you have to go and select it and go through this process. Now, I'm not sure, yeah, that's for, you can't do it for multiple layer groups. You literally have to click, 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 you know, for these. But at least you don't have to click update each time. You just click on the eyeball. So let me just cancel out of that. All right. And Dave Yoakum says, I use duplicate PLN files after modeling the existing. So that is another strategy for remodel projects. And you could, of course, do it for a something with multiple schemes. So in other words, you've got a base model, and then you copy the file. Now you have two files. Maybe you have them both open at the same time. You work on one, you work on the other. You can copy and paste things from one to the other. So, you know, say, oh yeah, this actually, I've added some more information here. It should be in the other file. You can copy and paste. But it can get complicated managing more than one file. So wherever possible, you know, it's, let's say, would be a little simpler, maybe preferred to have it in one file. But absolutely having separate files gives you more flexibility to do things. And I've seen people have a building and on the same, you know, file, just side by side, another copy of the building, possibly even 3 or 4 copies, each one working on different variations. So that's another thing, particularly in the early stages. Maybe it's even simpler. You just copy it around, play around with stuff. You know, you're not worrying too much. The file size is manageable, and you're just experimenting with things. So, okay. Moving on to some more tutorials. All right, this is something that has come up from some beginners, and I know it can be confusing. Here I have some walls. I want to change the height. It says 10 feet because that's what it was the default. It's gray. I can't change it. Even if I change this to top and home, well, actually, top and home offset says it's 0 and 0. What does that mean? It means that it's locked in or linked to the height of the next story. So I could change this and say it's going to be -1. And then when I go back to height and home offset, it'll be 0 and 9. A little hard to read there for me. But why is this gray? Because it is linked to the next story. Now, if I make it not linked, then this becomes editable. So, you know, a very simple little thing, but can be very frustrating if you don't understand why that is gray. It's because it was linked and you know didn't have an offset. So that's just something that hopefully will clarify it for some of you newer users. Okay, so we're going to go on to some visual tools for snapping and aligning things that I think can be confusing, and there are also some great opportunities if you understand them. So I'm going to go and turn on, under the View menu, the Construction Grid Display. So now we have something that sort of looks like graph paper. The spacing of this is flexible. I think in the US, the default is every 4 feet. In the international version, I don't know if it's every meter or every 2 meters or what it is. But of course, if you have that on and you get used to it, it can be helpful just to gauge the size of things. Now you can turn on a snap. And what that means is that when I'm drawing something like the wall tool, as I move my mouse around, there's a little dot that you can barely see jumping left and right here. And when I click, it's locking to that. So no matter where I go, it's going to be on the grid. here. So I can easily make something, that's nice even sizes. So this is 4 grid units, so that would be 16 feet, 8 feet, etc. there. Now, 4 foot or 1 meter or whatever it is in metric is a rather coarse measure. So, although it's technically possible that you could be designing on a grid and you want at least your basic, layout to be on those grid units. And I've seen, some designs. I think there was something that I saw with Frank Lloyd Wright or his grandson, who was actually one of my clients, Eric Lloyd Wright, working on a grid, and there were diamond grid. I don't know, it was sort of a triangular grid. It was very interesting. But we do have this another concept of a grid, which is a snap grid. So with the snap grid, if I click, you notice that it says 6'7", and as I move it a hair, it says 6'11", 7'4". It's nice even numbers. It's actually jumping by a different increment, and I'll just zoom in on it, and you'll see that it jumps by a single inch, 7'8", 7'9", 7'10", 7'11". So this is called the snap grid here. And so I could easily use this to get it to be precisely, nice 2 feet, etc. Now, how is that set? This is under the View menu, where we can turn on and off the grid display. Under Grid and Editing Plane Options, Grids and Background. And you'll see the main grid is set at 4 feet currently, and the snap grid that I was just looking at is set at 1 inch. Now let's experiment and just make this a larger increment, like 4 inches here. And now when I move, you see it's at 2 feet, jumps to 2 feet 4, 2 feet 8, 3 feet, 3 feet 4, etc. So now I can do it to the nearest 4 inches, which actually might be more practical. And in many cases, you could design a building to fit at least a large part of it on that type of metric. Now, another use of the grid, if I were to put in something like, let's just get a chair here. I don't like placing a toilet and moving around. I'm just going to put a chair. So if I put in this chair and I select it here, there is what's called the nudge command. So it's under the Edit menu, Move, and it's actually not here. Where is the nudge? Don't think it. They actually took it out of the menu, because the whole idea of the nudge is that why should you go up to a menu to move things just a little bit? But it is a command, and to remember the keyboard shortcut, I'm going to go to the Options, Work Environment, Keyboard Shortcuts, and I'll type in a search for nudge. It's not in the current menu structure, but it is in the commands when I change this. So if I wanted to nudge it down, Shift down. So that's holding down the Shift key, the one you use for capital letters, and the cursor key, in this case down, and guess what? Nudge left is Shift left, etc. So if I have this placed and I just want to move it a little bit, I hold down Shift, down, down, right, right. Okay, now if it was the 1 inch, the smaller snap grid, it would be moving it just a hair, tiniest bit. You can move that around. I'm sure there have been times you've put in some annotations, some text, and it's just been a little bit too close to something else, and you just want to nudge it, or maybe it's some furniture, etc. Hold down the Shift key and use your keyboard up, right, up, down, right, left to nudge things around. Now I made it to 4 inches, so it might be a little bit more than, might not give me as much flexibility, but you can change that at any point, as you saw. Now, we're going to take these sort of arbitrary grids and talk about using it for a construction purpose. Well, what do I mean? Well, as you know, when you build with masonry, bricks or CMU, you often will want to have the wall of a building be a certain whole number of masonry units, and you'll often want to have doors and windows cut into it at the edge of a masonry unit. So while you can measure things and type in values, it's nice to have a grid that helps you with that. So let's just see how this works. So if I'm going to turn off the grid snap here by clicking on this icon, so now I can go and we'll get rid of these guys here. And now, remember that 4-inch grid? Well, let's just take it a little bit bigger so it's easier to see. And if we have a CMU that's 8 inches, let's do that. So we'll go to the View, Grid and Editing, Plain Options, Grids in Background, and I'll make this, 8 inches here. Okay. And let's say that I want to pop in a window here at a grid snap. So I'm going to turn on the grid snap and I'm going to make sure it's set for the snap grid here. And if I go to the window tool and I say I want to put the corner of it in, you'll see, actually it's not snapping right now here. I need to turn that on. And now you can see it's jumping, right? And because I started this on one of the major divisions, this is a nice even unit. So, if I'm just going to place it and we'll look at the measurement. So if I select this, actually, if I just measure the distance from here to here, it's 2 feet. So it is a repeat of the 8-inch unit. Now let's look at this in 3D and see how that works. I'm going to turn off the grid for right now, and we'll look in 3D. All right, so right now I have a featureless wall. I'm going to select this wall, and I'll go to override the outer surface with something that would be, let's see, masonry structural. Okay, so now we're seeing blocks here. Now, did the block start at one end? I think it did here. We're going to talk a little bit about aligning it in certain cases, but this window is not looking like it's lined up on, on the edge here. That is because of a mistake in Graphisoft, the US version of the surfaces. Maybe it works perfectly in metric because the number, if we go to the surface and we say, I'd like to see the masonry structural, this thing here, how big is it? Well, look, it says 7'10" and 31/64. What the heck is that number? Not really very useful. I'll say 8. Now, why is that not letting me change that here? Maybe I have some keystroke turned on here. Whoa, what is going on here? Go back to surfaces here, and okay, so it was just a temporary thing. I'm going to make it 8 by 8. Ooh, look, there's my Siri saying there. Okay, I've got it 8 by 8, and we'll say okay. And you see how this texture all of a sudden is resized. And when I carefully place that window at a CMU division, we're now seeing that precisely working. So that was one thing I just noticed this was an issue. I looked into it and found, oh, the texture in the US version for CMU here is not scaled properly, right? Now, by the way, if we do go to an elevation here, and I think this would be the south elevation, we're going to see that this is coordinated. Now, this is actually could be different. This is line work, the other one is a texture, but they are nicely coordinated now. Now, let's look at this. If this wall wasn't on one of the native grid points, how would that work? So let me go and just eyedrop this wall here, and I'm going to put in another wall. And you notice how this other wall, actually, let's make it a little bit bigger. God, why? What's going on with this this dinghy here? Let me just make this a little bit bigger here. All right. Now, suppose that I wanted this to be a nice even number of masonry units here. and I wanted the window to fit in there. Well, let's take a look in 3D at what we have here. Okay, you can see that it does not start with a masonry unit. So this is the way that you can say, I've drawn it. This is where I want it on the property or in relationship to other elements. I would like to, under the document menu, creative imaging, align 3D texture, which is a very complicated place to find, but it is where you would set the origin of 3D textures. When I do that, I can click on this corner, and you see how this one now is starting with a nice division there. Now, in order to be able to put in the window at that location, what we can do is we can use the user origin, set user origin. So this little icon here, which also has a keyboard shortcut of Shift Option or Shift Alt, allows me to say I would like to put a measurement origin here, and then I can say I'd like to snap to the snap grid. Now, the snap grid, remember I set it and it was working earlier here to the 8 inches. Well, now it's set to start at this point. So if I go to the window tool here and I hover over this, you can see it snaps to the corner, and so I can make this in line. So it's snapped to that corner. Now on this wall, the little dot you can see is no longer even making the wall. I would even probably have a hard time putting in that window because that dot is not lined up. It is snapped to here. So in order to move that around to a new place, I turn off the grid and put the origin on a point, like this, and then turn the grid snap on, and now it's going to be in relationship to that. So this origin point is a way of setting the snap grid origin. So that is a very powerful thing to do, and the ability to move the texture origin. And let's just go back to 3D, and we'll see that now this window is, precisely I snapped it in on a unit there. Now the end of this was not set to, I just drew it arbitrarily. Let's just see how we would do that. I mean, you probably guess, but it's going to require a little bit of manipulation because I already have drawn it. If I select this here and I want to go and stretch this, I can't actually stretch it. Let me go, and if I grab this, okay, it is jumping to a good end. In other words, like a nice even number. Here's the 8 feet there. We can measure this from here to here. There's the 8 feet. So we can do that. But basically, sometimes you have to turn this off to select things and turn it back on to do some manipulation. So that's snap grid. And by the way, there's a keyboard shortcut that just showed up. It is Shift S. So if I hold down the Shift key and type S, you notice how that turns off, turns on, that turns off and on snapping. And then you have a choice of, am I on the snap grid or the big construction grid? So let's see if there are any questions right now or comments. All right, so going back to the whole thing of alternate schemes, Doug Mears says he's kept alternate schemes in modules. Okay, that can be a good way to do it. Then you can actually say, I want to bring in this module, or I'm using this module right now, and then you have another module that you can switch. You can update and say, front elevation scheme, I'm going to use this version of the file or that version. So that's actually a very clever way to do it. Okay. All right, so Tom says window placement in block wall should be for the rough opening. Yes, when you're creating a window, I haven't been paying close attention to it right now, but when we are putting in the window and we have a size of the window, we can say, is this the unit size? Is it, is it the rough opening? So we would be putting in the rough opening and having it snap there. So that is certainly, that would be an important part of getting the window to fit in properly there. Okay. Why did I lose the notes? Oh, it's interesting. Okay, so the questions here. Dave Yoakum says, have you experimented with ArchiCAD 24 under Big Sur? I have not. I have not upgraded to Big Sur. I probably won't for a while until Graphisoft says, that it's good to go. I think they have a warning or an advisory saying, well, it probably works okay. There are some issues or some things that aren't quite working. I just haven't paid close attention. I usually wait a few months. Now, if you buy a new computer from Apple, you probably are forced to use Big Sur, the latest operating system. You can't go backwards with the new computers. This computer that I've got right now, I bought in March, so it's on Catalina, I guess. Okay, all right. So I see Dave comments in my Slack workspace. Dave says, I use Nudge all the time, a great tool. Stance is really useful. And says, I haven't used the snap grid yet, but will in the future. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about rotating the grid, and then we're going to go into a whole different area of modeling that I think is really cool. It'll be much more visually, interesting than these things that I've been demonstrating. All right, so let us say here I'm going to turn off the grid snap, and let's say that part of the building, I'll just move over to the side here, part of the building is on an angle. Now I'm just going to do it as an angled box, but of course it could just be one wall, one room, etc. So when we're doing a box of walls here, I can do a box that's going horizontally or on the axes, or I can say I'd like to do it on an angle, and then the first two click points are going to define the angle, and I can either type in an angle, or I'll just do it sort of arbitrarily, and then this gives me my other side. Now whatever that angle is, whether it's a nice precise 30 or 22.5 or something like that, or just based on that part of the site, you might have a property line that's on some angle there. Sometimes you want to measure along this angle, along the new orientation. Sometimes you want to rotate the view, and I just want to make sure that some of these basic things are covered because they are so useful, and often people don't even know that you can do this. So first of all, if I wanted to rotate this view so that this was just more convenient to work with, I can use down in the lower left of your screen, this thing that has an orientation. It says orientation 0. And I can say I'd like to set the orientation graphically and click on, for example, a corner and another corner, and then rotate it down. And you can see it's giving me a preview, and I can snap, of course, to the axis. So now, temporarily, this is oriented this way. And of course, I can work here. If I'm drawing a wall, let's just do single wall. It's going to snap. It's going to snap to that and the 45s of this particular angle. And if I were to type in something like X, you can see that X is whatever I was drawing and Y is 0. So it's rotated the axes to make it simple to draw and define things. So I don't have to belabor the point. I can now make things that are certain distances offset and certain sizes along this angle. And it just is very convenient to be able to look at it. Now I can switch back and forth between this angle and 0 here. And it remembers, I forget which one, I think it was the 344 was the last one there. So that's a very convenient way to do it. Now the grid here, let me just put it back to the 0 here. The grid actually can be rotated separately. And so if I press down where I choose which type of snap I have and say I'd like to set a rotated grid, then I can snap in a similar way. And now the grid is rotated. Now I haven't rotated the view, so I'm seeing things with the normal quote unquote orientation, but the grid is rotated. Now, if I were to, having done that, it will snap. You can see the x-axis is showing there, and this is the y-axis. So even though it's not rotated, if I type in x, you can see that it has rotated the axes. So this is rotating the axis without changing it on screen. The other one changes it on screen and rotates the axis. So that is something that, you know, and you may have noticed that it actually put the grid starting at that first click point. So that sometimes there have been cases where, let's just put it back to our normal, what's on a 0 orientation, and I'm going to switch this back to the normal orthogonal grid here. And you see now it's not on the X there. This is on an axis. This is not on an axis. Let's say that I wanted to make the axis on this corner. Well, you can't move the orthogonal grid, but you can set a rotated grid that's not rotated. Watch. Set rotated grid. Click. Click. You notice how now the grid starts at that corner. It's not rotated, it's still 0 degrees, but by using that option, I've moved the grid to a convenient location. Now, how useful or important that is, I don't know, but certainly sometimes it's nice to just have things snap and line up, etc. So the set rotated grid allows you to move the grid start point as well as if you want to rotate it. The origin of the snap grid is set by the set user origin, but the origin of the visual grid is set by the set rotated grid option. Okay. Now Stan says, I've used set orientation and use control and click on a line to make angled line orthogonal. Okay, so there's a set orientation command. Is that, so I'm not quite sure what that command is. You say I've used set orientation. Or actually it's this one is set orientation graphically, same as you used. Okay, perfect. All right, good. So let's see if there's any other comments in here. So related to the Big Sur question, the Mac OS upgrade, Todd says, I found that ArchiCAD is buggy in Big Sur. It crashes when it wakes from sleep. Okay, I've definitely, even in Catalina, I've had ArchiCAD crash repeatedly when it wakes from sleep. I've walked away from the computer, come back, and ArchiCAD has crashed. Now, fortunately, the autosave generally is saved it just where it was, so I don't lose any work, but it is annoying. So I'm not quite sure that whether it has to do with Big Sur, because I've seen this in Catalina, something very similar. So Dave Yoakum says, I don't know if you've talked about 3D mice as a tip, but I can't imagine without working with one again. I use 3D Connection Space Mouse Compact. So I have not used a 3D mouse much. I was given one years ago when I was an ArchiCAD reseller, and we were shown at a reseller meeting, you know, here's this cool thing, and I never got used to it, and I just put it aside. Of course, it was an early version. It was probably like 2005 or 7 or 9, somewhere in there. So I'm sure that there are more variations in terms of what they do. So at some point, maybe I'll try that out again. Thank you for the tip, Dave. And in fact, since Dave, you are in my area, I think you're in San Anselmo. When the pandemic is over, maybe we can have a chat and I can drop by your office. Okay, so moving on. So now I have some really fun things. I hope you have been having some fun with this holiday potpourri. And before I do that, I'm going to show you something really fun. This is our new puppy in her holiday sweater, which my wife put on. Well, I guess she put it on okay, but she's gotten her paws out of there. So now she'll be a little bit better dressed. here. So this is Simone, who is 10 weeks and a few days. She is a Brussels Griffon. We had a Brussels Griffon for 17 years, and he died in June. So we've missed having a little being. So this is our pandemic puppy, so to speak. And she's been sleeping at my feet. Hello there. Okay, so just wanted to share one of the little sweet, fun things. And of course, wearing a holiday sweater, you know. Yeah. I'll put her back. Hopefully she won't. I mean, she may, I've now woken her up. She may start being a terror, but all right. Okay. All right, so Todd has a question about the 3D origin point here. So yeah, if I go to 3D and we zoom out here and I turn off, let's just turn off the construction, turn off the editing plane display here. I zoom out a little further. Where is that origin? There it is. There's that origin. Okay, X, Y, Z. All right. So this is your project origin. On the floor plan, if I zoom out, it's down in this corner. Now, normally most people don't pay much attention to the project origin. The project origin is just the point where everything is measured from internally. And we generally, it's in the lower left corner when you start out, usually. And so you're usually working in the upper right quadrant where X and Y are positive in relationship to it. Now you can draw in ArchiCAD in any place in relationship to it. You might draw it very close to this. And in fact, well, Graphisoft has put these in the standard template a little distance away so that this is not nearby and it doesn't have an issue. But let's just say here, remember that moving the origin. If I move the origin point, like I did for getting the masonry units to show, if I click on this, now you can see that there is this XYZ point here, and there might not be actually anything there. I can actually literally click it to place this origin point anywhere. All right, so now I'm looking at this building and the origin point is, you know, just a nuisance, right? I can't hide it. They used to have a little option down here that would hide that origin point. I don't know of a way to turn it off, but you can just use the set origin, move it off screen here, and now, you know, it won't be in your way. So hopefully that's helpful for you, Todd. Glenn says, can you show display and numbering grid? Okay, can you explain that, Glenn, what you mean by that? You're talking about grid lines for a building with numbers and letters possibly, or something else? I mean, we were showing the grid. Oh, can you show the display and numbering grid? I'm not sure you're meaning in 3D. If we do want to see it in 3D, we go to the View menu, Construction Grid Display, and we turn on Editing Plane Display. And you can see there's this surface with a grid. I can also turn off the Construction Grid Display, and now it's flatter. We can make this a little bit more prominent. Under Grid and Editing Plane Display, grids in background, the grid lines right now are fairly transparent. Let me just make them heavier here. Otherwise, this is, oh, they're the same color. That's an issue here. Let me just make this black. Okay, and notice here, this is the other thing that was very odd. In 3D, the grid is different. This says 6 feet 6, that's 2 meters here. So let me make it 4 feet by 4 feet, so it's going to be match the same thing. And the grid, the nudge grid here, look at this number, 1 and 31/32. It must be probably 50 millimeters or something like that. And so let me just make this 2 inches by, you know, nice even number for US people. All right, now I say okay, and show the construction grid display. You can see now I have that grid showing with a certain spacing. And if I go to the grid and editing plane options, grids and backgrounds, see how that's showing here. This makes it a little bit less prominent. You can see how it's getting fainter. This would make it very sharp. So you just define it the way you want, where it's helping you, but not getting too much in the way. All right, and that was controlled under the view. Construction grid display is the graph paper, and the editing plane display in this case is showing a plane. We're going to actually use that in just a little bit here. So next up will be some detailed elements that you will sometimes use on walls and ones that you'll use for certain types of roofs. I'm going to be showing some options for board and batten and for standing seam roofs. And we'll go through a few options quickly that are work, and then what I think I've just come up with, and I don't think I invented it, or I definitely didn't invent it, but I've just played around with it and gone, you know what? Curtain walls. Remember, plastic. How many of you saw the movie The Graduate at one point or another? And in the 60s, Dustin Hoffman's character was told by some older guy, you know, plastic, it's going to be a big thing. You know, if you get involved in plastics, you're going to, you know, you're going to have an advantage there because they were so new. Curtain walls. Start learning how to use curtain walls. Not for curtain walls necessarily, but for geometry. Let's see how that works. Okay, you can see I'm in a little jolly mood here. Hope you don't mind. All right, so I'm going to go and let's simplify what we've got here. I'm just going to get rid of some of this stuff. Just get rid of these things here, just so there's less to be confused about or whatever. So I'm going to go pop in, say a door somewhere. I'm in here, and we'll pop in a window here, and then I'll just for variation, I'll make a double window. Here. All right, so it's a little funny place. Let me just move this a little bit more off there. Okay, so, and I'm going to put in a roof. So this is just going to be a very simple thing. The default of the roof, for some reason in the Graphisoft standard, is up on the 3rd floor. I have never figured out why that would be. I'm going to say it's really up on the 2nd floor. I mean, obviously some buildings are 1 story, some are more, but why should the default be, you know, assuming that? And I'm also going to make this show not only on its home story, which would be the 2nd floor, but also on the home story and 1 story down, or I'll just say for now, all stories. So when I draw this roof like this, it'll show up this way. And when I go up a story using that keyboard shortcut that one of you shared, Command up arrow, I'm now looking at the roof without the walls. I'm on the next story up, jump down. All right, so what do we have? We have just something here. And I'm gonna, in order to be able to see it better, I'm gonna turn off the shadows here. So we'll just go to the view menu, 3D view options. And instead of using one that is in the standard Graphisoft template that shows shadows, I'm gonna use one that says simple shading. And that now is just a little easier for my purpose today. Now, how do you do board and batten? Well, as you know, and you know better than me because I'm not a trained architect, I just sound like one on TV. When you have board and batten, you're going to have boards, and then you're going to have the batten, which covers up the seams. Now, you don't normally focus on the seams so much, you know, and the gap between those boards in your model, but you do very clearly see the batten. So how do you get that? Now, One of the guests on the ArchiCAD user training webinars back in March was Leslie. Oh, sorry, I can't remember now Leslie's last name, but she works for Eisenman Design and in San Luis Obispo, I believe, in the coast of California. And she showed some fantastic work that firm is doing. Well, one of her tricks that I thought was very cool, I'm going to just demonstrate. When you go to the wall tool, if you have a composite here, you can do straight walls, a chain of walls in sequence, a box of walls, etc. And you can do curved walls. And you can even say, I'd like to have a wall that starts with one thickness and ends with a different thickness, but still has the same outer cladding. But this icon here is gray. It's called a polygon wall. In order to use the polygon wall, you need to switch to a simple wall, just made out of something. And so in this case, I'll say that I'm going to make it out of wood trim. I could say wood siding. I could say something else. Let's say wood siding, actually. Maybe that's better there. Now the wood siding, now I can draw a polygon. Now when you use the polygon option, I can literally draw any shape. If I go to 3D, we're going to see something very weird. It's this wood stuff that is like a slab. You know, I could make this and change its height here, down, change its height. You know, so a polygon wall could be used for a slab. Not that I would want to. Let me just delete it. And let's turn off the editing plane display. Okay, so I'm going to go in and do something, though, a little bit clever, let's say. I'm going to draw this, and I'll do this, say, an arbitrary distance, say 4 feet, and I'll make it some thickness. Now, I don't know what the thickness of the board would be. I'm just going to make it 1 inch thick, just so we can see it. It probably would be 3/4 or something like that. And I'm going to lock this on the Shift key, and I'll basically make a box. All right, now this, I'm going to put on a different layer. You notice how all of a sudden this wall got messed up because this little wall and that wall, they're trying to clean up to each other. So I'm going to put this on a layer that, like a trim 3D, where it's not trying to clean up to the wall. Now, what have I done here? Well, I've now got a little piece of siding. Now, I had to draw it on 4 points instead of just a little box, because this is something that is a polygon, and I actually can edit the outline just like when you edit a slab. So let me now do something. Now, I don't know how we deal with the corner, but I'm just going to do something very simple. I'm going to go in here and do a box that is 2 inches. And again, the dimensions of this are arbitrary in the sense that you can make it whatever you want. It's the principle that I want to show here. So let me just make it 1 inch here. All right, so this is now a little separate piece, and it's going to go the same height from 0 to 10 or whatever it is. And what am I going to do? I'm going to create multiple copies of it. So I'll use the shortcut for multiply, and we'll say I want to take this, say, every 1 foot, and then take it to there. Okay, so now if we look in 3D, we'll start seeing something that sort of looks like board and batten, right? There. Now, instead of doing those little things as separate little pieces, which you could do, it's nice to be able to do it as a unit. So what I might do is, because this tends to be, you'd want to have them fit into each other, I'm just going to drag this over 1 inch there, so it's halfway, and I'll get rid of the one at the end for now. Now, if we were to take these and repeat them, then the next batch would fit in right there. But instead of making it them separate pieces, I'm going to select this and use the Polygon Editing option in the Pet Palette here to say I'd like to add in a shape. So I'd like to add to the polygon, and then I'll magic wand, I'll hold down the space bar and click. And you can see how now this shaded area includes this. And again, I'll go to an edge or a corner and say I'd like to add and spacebar click, and do that again, and spacebar click, and do that again, and spacebar click. Now, this element, if I drag it, is all of those shapes, and I don't need these other ones anymore, right? At least I'm gonna, for today, I'll just turn that off. So I'll just get rid of those. And so again, I don't know about how this would fit in at the end there, and what we'd have to wrap the corner. But let's just say that I multiply this, and we'll take it from, whoops. So I'm just multiplying, I'm saying from this point to here. So I'm not leaving a gap, but I am, I'm going to slide this over. And well, let's just take it to the side of the door. We won't take it all the way because we have to deal with openings, and I don't want to have it mess up everything all at once. So now if I go to 3D, we've got, the board and batten, and this is one piece, that's another piece, that's another piece. All right, so you can, of course, paint it. You can have each of those, each of these things. If you didn't combine them into what do you call it, a single unit, that could be contrasting colors. Actually, you can even in this, I think you can select this. Let's just see, I think that I can go to this edge and say I'd like to change. So let me change this edge, offset edge. It does not do there. Let me just see if I can do that on the plan. So if I go here, press down, no, I don't have an option for changing just that one edge to a different color. So in any event, this is one way that you can do it. How would you cut a hole in it for the window? Well, we have a window here. There's a way to use the new hole tool. You could put in an empty opening. In the last couple of versions of ArchiCAD, they've added in an opening tool. Now there is a way to select the window and tell it to generate an opening in some adjacent surfaces. I haven't actually gotten that comfortable with that, so I'm just going to literally pop it in here, and we'll stretch that opening. See, offset edge. Okay, actually, I go to, come on now, take this edge, offset the edge, take it out to here, and take this out to here. It's interesting. Why is it? Well, I guess it's because this is a new piece. So we'd probably want to line these up here. Let me just go to 3D. The appearance of the hole, obviously sometimes you want to see it like this, but there is an option to say, I don't really want to highlight it. I don't want to have no symbol here. And now it just becomes a cutout. You can see how it's cut out where the board and batten is, but of course it's a hole that has a defined elevation. And it's now the width of the window, but we would want to offset the edge. I'll just take it up above the window, perhaps, and down below. So we can basically have this and match this to the, being a little bit awkward here, but I select the window, the opening, and take that and snap it. Should be able to snap it to the end of the window. We can certainly set this to match the window edge, and there must be something about the opening that allows you to tell it to cut into other elements, and I can't remember now how that works, so apologize for that. So the idea here is that we can either create different versions of this board and batten and just have it, the height be underneath it and another piece above and one on the left and one on the right, or you can cut empty holes into there. Now, this is the only way, well, not it's the only way. You can't just use the wall tool and say, I have a profiled wall and get this, because profiles are what you see in a section and they get extruded. So if you have siding that's horizontal or board and batten that's running horizontally, then you can do that. But for vertical stuff, you need something that does like this. So this is one way that you can do it, and you could literally copy these things around and cut holes in them. And I'm sure if I spend another 10 or 15 minutes, I get the thing with putting in holes down to a science. But I'm going to show you how to do this with the curtain wall tool. And I think this has, is fantastic because the curtain wall tool is so flexible. So let's take a quick look at the curtain wall tool. So with the curtain wall tool, there is a concept of, first of all, its overall size, its thickness, and its distance from the line that you draw to the panels. And there's a scheme, so shapes here. So if I just use the curtain wall tool just without setting anything, just the default, like this, you can see that it's created something with this grid. It's got, different panels, etc. But this is totally configurable. So what I'm going to do is say, I'd like to, instead of working with the setup here, I'm going to start from scratch here. Now this would create, literally, if I chose a shape, it would just create a single surface with one division. And in fact, this is a deleted shape. It would just create an outline, just create sort of a boundary in space. But what I'm going to do is say that I'd like to have the columns be, I was saying 1 foot apart. So I'll just say 1 foot here. And instead of number of divisions, I'll say fixed size. So now basically it'll repeat every 1 foot. Whereas rows, meaning how many that stack up from bottom to top, I do want it to just be 1 division like this. Now, the fixed size here, this is, I can say that just for visualization, that it's taller. I'll just make it 10 feet. So now this would be, a 10-foot high board and batten, which may not be practical, or, maybe it has to be different, but we'll just start out with that. Now, I'm going to go and, what am I going to do here? So we have the fixed size. Now it has a boundary in here. Now the bottom and the side here are boundaries, whereas the right side and the top would be divisions as we repeat this. Now this one, it says it's going to merge. I'm going to change this to a mullion. So it's basically going to create a division. Look at it, it starts to look almost instantly like it's a batten. Go click to this one, and I'll say, no, it's going to merge. And in fact, since I've just said make it go the full height, it won't even have anything there. Now, when we go to the frames here, it's saying, all right, when you're working on the mullion, what is the shape? And we can use, different shape things here, like the butt glazed frame is something that is just a simple rectangle. And in this case, horizontally, we'll make it, say, the 2 inches to match what I was doing nominally. And I'll make this 1 inch thick here. So it's going to be just a 1x2 piece. Now, again, the dimensions are arbitrary. I'm just trying to make it simple to do. And what is it made from? It's going to be made from something. We'll just do the same thing, wood, siding, or something like that. Okay, so this will, if I draw a curtain wall now, it'll just have divisions vertically for the battens. And now I do want to check the boundary. Now, does the boundary get some sort of arbitrary frame like this? I'm going to do something simple. I'll say, make this invisible. So it will not have a boundary there. Now I can go in and put something at one end or on the bottom or top if I want, but for now we'll just do a very simple thing. So having done that, I also want to just make sure that the nominal thickness, I'll just make this the 1 inch thick that I have, and that this is going to be, that the reference line is going to be set up, centered. And then if I do have boundary, like, essentially some sort of end piece here, I would like it to be inside the boundary. So I'm going to have a boundary line, and just in general, that particular, any piece I put in is going to be inside of that. So these you can play around with, but let's just see what happens when I draw this just in space. You can see what it's done, very, very quickly like that. So let's just do it from this side here. Okay, so we now have the batten, so of course we would make the wall, whatever cladding would have the siding boards there. Now, of course, we might want to line up the windows so that it goes between these naturally, but how would you just take this type of thing with a curtain wall and cut a hole? Well, I think you probably could use the opening tool for it, and maybe that's going to be best, but let's just see. If I go here and select the curtain wall and say edit it, I can then go and modify things. So one of the things that I can do is I can say I'd like to draw a new frame. So what is the frame? I'm going to basically draw a division and say it stops here and it's starts again over there. And this frame is going to be an invisible shape, because it isn't necessarily going to have something going across. It'll just stop dead there. And this, it's going to be a mullion, no, it's going to be a transom frame. It's going to go horizontally here. And I'm going to make this have a higher priority. So when priorities mean that when things meet, a vertical and a horizontal meet, which one pushes through? And I'll just make this a higher priority. Now I haven't done this much here, so hopefully I'll get this to work, but let's just go from here. And I'll take it over to this point. And now I ended up, for some reason, I thought I was putting in an invisible one. It put in this butt glaze, but I'm just going to go in and select all of these in a row here. So I've just used the option curtain walls to do that. And I'll say, no, this is going to be invisible. Now, it doesn't look like much of anything, but now you can see that this upper piece is separate. So let me go and eyedrop this here, and let's pop in another one along here, across to there. And now these guys get removed. So may need to adjust the spacing here, but basically I now have a very quick way to put in the battens along any distance that I want, and just cut holes in it for the doors and windows. So while there's probably going to be some refinement as I play around with this more, I am, sort of very pleased to see that we can get this sort of effect. Now I'm going to show you a quick variation to get a lattice, because if you think about a lattice, or when you see a lattice, you'll see we have two different planes. And at first I was trying to see, can we get one curtain wall and have verticals and horizontals and have them work? But it doesn't like doing that, because they try to make the vertical and horizontal connect to each other. And in at least what I'm trying to design based on a question that came in, we would want to have them just pass in separate planes. So how would we do that? Well, it turns out it's very simple to do. So I've got this curtain wall here. I'm going to do a little piece. Whoops, I dropped the wall. I want to eyedrop the curtain wall there. So we'll do this, and I'll create a copy of this. So I'll drag a copy using keyboard shortcut, and we'll just take this, I guess, Take it well, that's 45. I want it to be on the axis. I guess that's the axis, 1 inch. Okay, so you can see I've now got 2 of them back to back. And let me just take the front one and make a change to it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go into the settings. I'll say that in terms of the frames or the scheme, I'll say that this one here is going to be, I'll just call it a mullion frame just because I've already got the settings for that. And this one here, I'll say it's none, merge panels there. And we'll make instead of the columns being one size apart, I'll just say it's going to be just 1 division. And this one is going to be 1 foot apart, and it's going to be fixed sizes. So now I think, and we want the 1 foot. So I'm going to have this row going vertically. Every foot there'll be a division, but horizontally it'll just be 1. And I'll just make this a little bit bigger in terms of the visualization. So it'll be basically it'll go across with 1 division, but vertically it'll stack. So I'll just say okay. So you can see how we now have a lattice work. Very simply, there are 2 separate curtain walls. The back one is like what we had before. The front one, I've just said, you know what, I'm going to repeat vertically and just have it uniform going horizontally. Now, that lattice work, of course, could be any size division. One thing is you can actually rotate this. So if you wanted to have this on an angle, you can do that. So how would we do that? So if I select this curtain wall and I say edit it, one of the things that we can do is turn on the scheme grid here. And you can see we now have a very visible blue area. And I'm going to turn off the environment just so that we're only looking at the curtain wall. And I'll even turn off all of the other things that we're looking at. So we're just seeing the scheme grid. Now, if I select this, so it was visible, but now I've selected it and I press down on a corner. I think, actually I have to go, maybe I press down on here. That's the scheme. Okay, I don't know. For some reason, sometimes it comes up and sometimes it doesn't. This says I can move the grid, so I could have it start at a different elevation or a different point horizontally, but this is rotate. So I'll say rotate the grid. It says enter rotation center point. I'll say it's going to start here. It's currently here, and I'll take this up at 45. Okay. Now, it looks a little odd here, but as soon as I turn back on the frames, we'll see that it's within this boundary. It's showing me sort of the theory of where it would extend, but it's within that boundary. So I'll just say exit edit mode. So now I have this one rotated. I can do the same, of course, with the back one here. Edit it. With the environment turned off, it's a little easier to see. I can turn on the scheme grid and turn all of these off at the same time by holding down the control key and clicking. So now I'm seeing the scheme. I'll select the scheme here and press down. And let's see if I go press again. Come on now, why? If I go to this corner. I'm trying to figure out why it's not giving me the option to rotate. I know that I can rotate this here. It's a system scheme, so I'm selecting this here, going there. Okay, so I selected the whole thing rather than the boundary. I think that's what I had to do. I'd select inside there. Now I can rotate this, and we'll rotate this going a different 45. I think this will work here, and then exit edit mode. Oops. Well, I do have them, what do you call it, in opposing directions, but for some reason when I did that, I rotated the whole thing. So the boundary of it doesn't have to be rectangular, and we're going to take advantage of that when I look at the next thing, which will be our last demonstration today. We're almost at the 2-hour mark, and I've actually, been able to get most of those things working the way I wanted. So this whole shape here, by the way, if I were to select this and edit it, I can change the height of it. So this is the boundary. I can select the boundary. Let's see if we say show the scheme grid. I can select this and move this boundary down. So just sort of to be arbitrary, and then say exit. And you can see now it's just a smaller piece. We'll take this one and again, edit. Only show the scheme grid and take this one, this down. But let me turn on the environment so that I can see this and snap it and then say exit edit mode. And you can see how I can have a little piece like that. All right, so let's look at something and tell me what you think of this. All right, so Chris says I have snap on. I'm not sure that's okay. All right, so there's definitely a lot of comments here. So let me just make sure I answer them before I go on to the next thing. Okay, so Yasik says, nice to see you, Yasik. You're another one of my old friends, old clients. Nice presentation. Is the webinar going to be available online? Is it recorded? Yes, it's being recorded, thankfully, and it will be posted on my YouTube channel as well as the ArchiCAD user website. Okay, Dan Wyckoff. At one of the early demo calls from Graphisoft, they explained to Mac OS users how to go to dark mode. Cannot remember how to do that. I don't remember. I don't use dark mode, so I can't give you a quick answer. Sorry about that. How does working units work? Are they tolerances that they can be used to regulate things that are entered, such as angles or lengths, so things are not off by 0.1, a fraction of a degree? So this is a little sidetrack, but basically we go here. Let's just see working units. So if we go to project preferences, working units. So working units have to do with what ArchiCAD will show you in the tracker. So if you reduce the working units down to something like 1/8 inch or 1/2 inch or even 1 inch, it will show you the nearest one of those divisions. But if you're just drawing and you're not snapping or typing in something, it'll be some arbitrary distance. So let's say you rounded it to the nearest inch. It looks like you're drawing things nice even inches, but you might be drawing something like 11 3/4 inches rather than 12 inches. So what you want to always do is type in values or snap to make things end where they should be, rather than relying on the working unit rounding it for you. Now, the working unit is, sometimes people just prefer having it show things, not down to the 64th, that's fine, but I would never rely on just what you see on screen. I would always type it in or snap. Now, this is separate from your dimension preferences, where you can say dimensions should be rounded to the nearest 1/8 inch or the nearest whatever. That's a separate preference, and that affects the readout, on the dimension annotation. So that's sort of the quick answer there. You can change this for what you want to see on screen, but it does not affect what you're drawing. And that's why you should always use a snap grid or type in a value or snap to something that is a nice distance there. All right, so Lawrence Brill says CAD image coverings has to be one of the most worthwhile add-ons of any for ArchiCAD. It will do your wall coverings, roof slabs, etc. so much quicker, and with the ability to change and apply quick options. Okay, so CAD image coverings recommended by Lawrence. CAD Image is a company based in New Zealand. What used to be connected to the New Zealand reseller or distributor for ArchiCAD, and now, I'm not sure what the story is, because the people who created CAD Image moved on. One of them's in the head office in Budapest, is somewhere up in development or management, and the other, I believe, is head of Graphisoft's U.S. office. Trying to remember her name. I've met her a few times and talked with her, but I can't remember her name now. Anyway, CAD image products are good. They do cost money. They are on a subscription basis, so they cost money monthly or yearly. You're more than welcome to check them out. I used to sell their products. I just don't have time to do that anymore, but they are good. They CAD image coverings, it specifically does give you options for putting something on the face of a wall, putting something on the face of roofs. So it's covering something that you do with a generic tool to give it more detail. All right. So Chris says, I have Snap-on. I'm not sure when that was and if that caused the issue. You can also use an empty opening in the wall or door tool. Yes, so you can use an empty opening rather than the opening tool for that. Okay, so the opening doesn't have to be linked to one wall. Then it cuts more than one wall. So I haven't used the opening tool very much, and so that's something that I guess I will play around with so I can get more comfortable with creating those openings. Paul Galliford, can you quantify the lengths of batten modeled in a curtain wall? I believe you can do quantities in curtain walls, and so you can categorize the divisions, which are the battens there, and do some quantities. I haven't experimented with that, but I'm 90% sure that you could do that. Most likely you can. So Roger says, can you use the lattice idea and make hog wire? Can you rotate that to a stair railing? You definitely could do something like that. So hog wire would, instead of the dimensions being rectangular, it might be round. And instead of it being something this size, it would be wire, whatever thickness the wire is there. So it wouldn't be part of your railing, but it could look like it was part of the railing. So that would be something. Yeah, and so you saw that I had one of the divisions going on an angle and the other one going vertically, or vice versa, I don't know. So yeah, but you could rotate the whole thing. And in fact, we're going to see how curtain wall can be rotated. I have it vertically, but we're going to see it on an angle in just a minute. Okay, so Dave Yoakum, great curtain wall tip for board and batten. A little used tool for me that has enormous possibility. Needs to be a YouTube channel instruction. Okay, I probably will do some more on that. All right, so and Eric Reinhard, curtain wall lattice trick looks like a good way to explain construction of a rain stream cladding system. Okay, good, you can apply it to other things. Can you rotate it to match the roof pitch? Yes. All right, let's take a look. So there are two ways that I know, well, let's say three ways that I know to do something like a standing seam. Okay, one is the quick, simple one, which is you take the roof, which is flat. You'd say that you want to override the surface. You choose a surface that looks like standing seam. Okay, now how close does it look like standing seam? Well, it sort of looks a little bit like standing seam, and you take your south elevation here and it sort of looks like standing seam. Okay, all right. So that is one way to do it, but it's obviously very flat, doesn't look realistic. You might be able to get a better looking texture, but it will never bump out. So let me just undo that change. So we'll just leave it plain. Now, another way to do this that I thought was super clever, and now I think, well, it's good, but there's a better way. But I'll show it to you. We're going to go to the plan, go select the roof, and we'll use the design menu, roof extras, roof maker. So what is roof maker? It's an add-on that's included with ArchiCAD, and it allows you to create, typically to create framing for a roof, rafters, hips and valley, rafters, beams, and so on. Now you can create one element, you can create a bunch of rafters in a row, but you can also use the wizard to create a whole system for the roof. Now, when I do the roof wizard, it has all of these different pieces. Now, for this demonstration, I'm only going to create rafters. I'm not going to create collars and ties, beams, blocking, or hip rafters. I'm only going to create the basic rafters. And instead of them being framing, I'm going to make them like well, actually, wait a second. This is going to be, I guess, a ½ inch. Actually, let's just make it 1 inch so it's more visible. And in this case, things don't have to be exactly the size that they are in construction. They just have to be clear so that it looks like it. So you may sometimes exaggerate the size of things here. So I'm just going to make this 2 inches high. So these are going to be little knobs that are going to represent the standing seam bumps, right? And I'll say how far apart? Well, 16 inches. Oh, let's just make it 2 feet here. I don't know what would be a nominal size. And there are some options for how it would double it, etc. like that. Now, what is it made of? Well, let's just make this out of metal, finished stainless steel or something like that. I don't know. Okay, so I'm basically saying create some things using the rafter option that are really I'm going to have above the roof to make it have the standing seams. So I'll say okay. And it says, you created something that's not seen because it's on another story. Oh, well, that's because the roof's up on the upper story. All right, so I'll go up to the upper story. And ooh, that 2 feet didn't quite work there. So let me just undo that. Let's go and select the roof and do that design, roof extras, roof maker, roof wizard, and we'll say that this is going to be, I'll just do 1 foot here. Okay, so try that. Continue, go up. Why is this spacing like that? This is, did I make this so tiny? Maybe I did, but that's not, this is not not working the way I practiced it. So getting too fancy. Roof maker, roof wizard, create rafters here, width and height, distance between normal rafters, minimum distance 6 inches. Let's just turn off all of these things here. Yeah, I don't know why. Oh, no, this is distance between normal rafters. Let's see, 1 foot, maybe it was 1 inch. I don't know what was going on there. I say, okay. What the hell happened here? Let's just go to 3D and see if there's some objects that have been put in. No, it put in something on the edges. So try one more time. And if it doesn't work, then I'll just jump to the curtain wall option. So design, roof extras, roof maker, roof wizard, saying create rafters. The width is here. The distance, why is this distance between normal rafters? I wanted this to be 1 foot. There. Now, let's just say 16 inches. There. Okay, vertical there. We have none of these, none of those. We don't want the plate beams. There, okay. So now we're doing this. And let's put it on the right layer. Possibly it's on a different layer, but let's just do this on a trim here. Okay, okay. And there we go. Okay. Well, that looks a little bit more like what I expected, or much more. Go here. Now, I go to 3D, I don't see it. These are objects. So I've got the object tool active. I go and select all objects, and you'll see there's a whole bunch of things that are buried like framing would be. They are down here. I'm just going to drag them up to there. Okay. So By the way, if I haven't figured out a way to just have them placed precisely where we want. They always go based on the bottom of the roof, and so you may need to always adjust that. Now these things here are actually editable. So, for example, this element here, if I wanted to have another one on the other side, I could mirror a copy of it, or I could drag this. Of course, standing seam, you probably couldn't drag it, but let me just drag a copy of it to here. Okay, so they are elements that you can drag around and make fit in there. So what does it look like in elevation, etc.? It looks probably pretty good as long as you get the dimensions right. So it is looking representative of standing seam. I probably made them a little too tall, etc. Okay, so that is a quick and dirty way to do it. It is fully editable. You can change the dimensions of those things. You can change the spacing. You can move them around, do that sort of stuff. Now let's look at how you use a curtain wall. So I'm going to go and just get rid of these. So just select all of those objects that I just carefully made. I'll go and eyedrop the curtain wall. And in this case, I'm going to put the curtain wall up here. Now the dimensions of it is probably not right for a standing seam, but we can adjust that. It is just so cool to be able to go to the curtain wall and say, instead of drawing it vertically, I want to use one of these options here. This is horizontal, this is vertical, and this is perpendicular to a surface. I think if I just leave it here and I click on this, see, I think if I click on this to activate it and then I click here, you notice how the cursor changes to match the surface as I'm moving around. Whoops. Let me just do it. Actually, let's do it on this surface here. And then it says enter first node of curtain wall. I'm going to say put it on the top there. Go here. Oh, that's facing the wrong way, but it is interesting that way. Perpendicular to that. So click to complete normal vector. Oh, okay. No, I don't want that. I just want a surface here. So if I say on this surface, and now you can see the surface, I think makes more sense. No, it's still perpendicular to it. So I know when I was doing it before, it worked perfectly. Oh, I have to switch to this mode, sorry. This is perpendicular to whatever the plane is. This is following the plane. And so now if I say I'm going to go on this plane and just click a series of points and get this notice out of the way. Let's see. So I'm going to go to the end here and take this up and click one more time, and look what I got. Now I'll do it to this side. Click, click, and go to the two corners and click one more time there. So while the dimensions might need to be adjusted, it is something that we can go in here and just simply say as a whole, what is the size of this element here in terms of a frame? This mullion frame here, 2 by 1, it's going to be, let's say that it's only 3/4 inch here, and it's 1 and 1/2 there. So it's going to be a little bit taller like that. And you can see it's actually now there. And of course, I just need to make sure that it's flipped. I think if I flip this there, that flipped which side. So there you have the use of the curtain wall along the face of a roof to create a simulation of standing seam with whatever dimension you want. And just like when I had those objects, if I select this, if I go to the edit, I can go and literally select individual pieces, and I'll just delete it just to show you. So I can select them, I can move them, I can stretch them, all of those things. So this is the end of my holiday potpourri. Let me know what you think. All right, so Maria says you always learn something from the webinars, have to go to sleep, must be late there. Kevin says, how will the wooden lattice be shown in a schedule when taking quantity of work? It's a good question, but I think the lattice, you could be showing just the boundary and quantifying the amount. I'm not sure, in terms of you getting it the length. I mean, certainly a curtain wall, you can get reports saying the length along the main axis line and the height. And so that lattice, if it's, 85 feet along the fence line and it's 2 feet high, in terms of lattice, then you could get at least some rough numbers. If you made them out of pieces as opposed to, extending it, you could say how many pieces 8 feet long, 2 feet high, etc. Okay, can timber work or so? Okay, I'm not sure what you're asking there. Okay, so Rob has a question to support. So we are going to be, those of you who are in the ArchiCAD coaching program, I will be jumping over to that, and I'll give me 5-10 minutes and I'll start that. Okay, so Joel points out that I was spacing the rafters at 1 inch instead of 1 foot. Yeah, so okay, so there is a, Paul says that there's a roof maker toolbox. So in addition to that dialog box, there's a toolbox where you can just play around with settings and try it again. Okay, and check elevation. All right, so nice comments from Doug. Have a great holiday and love the puppy. All right, a lot of thank yous. All right, thank you, Jesse, John, Ian, Michael, Eleni, okay. All right, Rich. Okay, Dave, always learn something new. Yeah, very original. Thank you, Roger. Curtain wall ideas and the grid nudge info was extremely helpful. Okay, thank you, Todd. Bobrow, you're somewhere in the South Pacific, I think, or somewhere in Asia. So thank you for joining me. Okay, and okay, so good, thank you. All right, so so thank you all for joining me. I will be sending, posting this recording, and then we'll be sending out some more emails. I'll be having an end of year sale for those of you who are interested in learning more formally or comprehensively from me. So you'll be able to take advantage of, some special pricing to get into my ArchiCAD Best Practices 2020 course. And the coaching program. In the coaching program, you get the opportunity to ask me questions every week, to send in your files and have me work on them and clean them up, all of that. So I send you my warm wishes for a safe, healthy, and as joyous as possible holiday season. Thanks for watching.